The Cincinnati Opera 2022 Summer Festival is back, and more importantly, it is back where it belongs. Evans Mirageas is the artistic director of the Cincinnati Opera, and Evans, it has to feel so good to be back.
You know, we had our annual free concert in the park last night with nearly 1,000 people there. I think more than 1,000 actually. And my concluding remarks included a quote. Because this past week was the 100th anniversary of the birth of Judy Garland. And in her most famous film role, and probably her most famous line she uttered in her entire career, she said, "There's no place like home. There's no place like home." And it's so true. Walking around Music Hall, we have 3 rehearsal spaces, of course, our great Springer Auditorium stage. The place is alive with hundreds of people working backstage, the orchestra getting ready for the next rehearsal, 2 sets of rehearsals going on in 2 different rehearsal halls. The buzz is incredible. So yes, it's good to be home.
And of course, just like all of us, we kind of cobbled together and made do during the last year or two. And the opera was able to do that, to reach maybe a new audience last year.
Nothing short of miraculous that we were able to go to Summit Park in Blue Ash, have everybody sit in there lined out, very safe pods, perform totally out of doors, to great reception and great attendance. And we loved it. And we're not so expensive to create an entire opera house in the middle of a city park. We'd be back there again for at least something this summer. And we're not giving up on the idea of at some point having an event in a future summer at Summit Park or another park like that. Because you're right, Betsy. When you go out to people, you reach them in ways that sometimes they think, oh, music hall, you know, it's long ways to go, or it's a very formal place. Neither of which is true, of course, but that's okay. First you sort of, as it were, reduce people's anxiety or trepidation or discomfort or whatever you want to call it with being in a grand space. You get them hooked on the art form, and then they'll come to music hall. But yes, Music Hall was built originally for concerts, and then in the 1890s turned into one of the most glorious opera houses in the country. And it's our home. So yes, there's no place like home.
Do you think that having the opera go to the people, as you mentioned, does that bring in new fans? Does that bring in a new audience to you think?
We know for certain, because we did some pretty heavy surveying last summer, that people came to Summit Park who'd never been to Music Hall. We don't know yet how much that's going to translate. And frankly, Betsy, that's okay, because we like to reach people in every way we can possibly think of. Last night's concert, free concert in the park, for example. Many of those people come to the opera. Some of them don't. For some of them, that's their only exposure to opera in a year. But that's fine, because there is no monolithic audience for opera or symphony or art exhibits. It's hundreds of audiences. And so we use this sort of multi-pronged approach with our education and community engagement events, our free events, of course, our summer opera season, our winter events that we have in Music Hall, because we want to reach everybody one way or the other. Not everyone is going to buy a subscription. Not everyone is going to buy a ticket to Pirates of Penzance, although a lot of people are, thank goodness. So we want to make certain that we fulfill a mission that opera should be accessible for anybody who wants to give it a try, and on their own terms.
All right, well, you mentioned the Pirates of Penzance. Let's talk about this season. What are we going to be seeing?
Well, we really felt that coming back to Music Hall, we needed some comedy as well as the usual high tragedy of opera. For the tragic side, it's of course the bittersweet romance of Puccini's La Bohème, perhaps the opera that carries the title the most beloved opera, for sure. What's more beloved than young love? And what's more sad than young love ending too soon? And then the grand spectacle, the grandest opera of them all to close the season, Verdi's Aida. At one point, there's going to be probably over 130 people on stage, as well as the full symphony orchestra in the pit. And then for that bit of comedy, that lighthearted interlude, Pirates of Penzance by Gilbert and Sullivan. It's the first time we've done any GNS since the mid-1980s, and there's a reason for that. Back then, apparently, we were trying to stretch our season a little bit beyond the beginning of August and offer lighter fare. So we did musicals, and we did Gilbert and Sullivan. And apparently, according to historical lore, we didn't do it very well. So I've always been a little bit hesitant to go to GNS because if we do it, we have to do it at the same level of quality as Aida and Loyal, and we are. We have great opera singers. We have a charming, cartoonish production, a phenomenal conductor for our great Cincinnati Symphony. So I think GNS returns to our canon, as it were, in absolutely ship-shape form. Sorry, I'm just full of these crazy nautical bad jokes because what can you do with Pirates of Penzance? But equally exciting for me is the fact that we will finally be able to give the world premieres of two operas that we had commissioned to celebrate our 100th anniversary, which we didn't celebrate officially because we weren't making opera in the summer of 2020. Pirates of Penzance and Aida and Carmen are framed by two operas at the School for Creative and Performing Arts, our other venue down the street at SCPA, in a beautiful 750-seat auditorium. And one of them is a delightful opera for everyone. It is about the trials and tribulations of becoming an adult, specifically becoming a female adult. And this is called Fierce. And it's by Cincinnati born and raised composer William Menefield, who has gone on to a wonderful career as a composer and performer, with a libretto by Sheila Williams, celebrated author who lives just across the river in Kentucky, and directed by Cincinnati's own D. Lynn Myers, the producing artistic director of Ensemble Theater for 20 years. That's, I think, something that the entire family will love, because everybody grows up. Everybody has to, sooner or later, and these stories are quintessential, archetypal girls who are all exciting and wonderful traits, but each one of them has a little secret that they're trying to struggle with. The other one is Castor and Patience. It's composed by Gregory Spears, who is the composer of our runaway hit from 2016, Fellow Travelers, about the lavender scare of the 1950s. That opera is already in its 11th production around the country. It's extraordinary. This time, Gregory has collaborated with our nation's poet laureate, Tracy K. Smith, to create an opera we call Castor and Patience, and is the story about a family dealing with an inheritance that can either prove to be their reuniting or their undoing, and how greed and need come together and hopefully foster understanding about where you really belong. So it's an exciting season, and it's a little bit like planning a wedding, what they used to say, something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue. We've got a little of everything.
Certainly sounds like it. Why do you think it is so important for the Cincinnati Opera to have these world premieres? I mean, it is truly a world premiere. Why do you think it is so important? Why did the Cincinnati Opera embrace having a brand new production? Because there's a risk of having a brand new production. Why did you embrace it?
If we don't create new works, we will become fossilized. We'll go the way of the Goonie bird. And frankly, I'm not interested in a world of opera that doesn't engage with the topics of our time, as well as honor the traditions. And we're blessed and uniquely positioned in the entire United States opera firmament, especially in the summertime, because we are the only company producing in the summer that can produce the grand operas like Aida in the splendor of wonderfully air-conditioned music hall. But we also have a commitment to the art form to keep it fresh and vibrant and renewed, because I love what I call the ABCs, Aida, Bohème, and Carmen. And I'll always make them new because there'll always be different casts, a different production. But we have so many stories to tell of our own time, to try and speak to the younger audiences who are coming of age in this very complex, complicated world. And so for us to tell stories that relate directly to them, I think is equally important. And these two world premieres are a perfect example. Fierce is set now. I mean, it could be yesterday. And Castor and Patience, although it takes place in 2008, deals with the property crisis of that year. You know, here we are now in inflation. These problems never go away. But also the potential for solutions is always present. So I think it's vital that an opera company like ours, with the resources that we have, and the ability to produce at both ends of the spectrum, we have an obligation to do so.
Well, Evans, we talked about just how exciting it is for your guests to come back to Music Hall and see these productions. What does it mean to the performers to actually be in that building and know there's going to be an audience? They get to perform for an audience that's sitting right there.
Lots of tears at early rehearsals, let me tell you, because some of these young performers and the veterans as well are just overwhelmed by standing on that stage again and hearing their voices go out into that beautiful auditorium, because some of them haven't had work for 2.5 years, or very little, or only online. So to get back to what most of them have trained all of their adult lives to do is, it's like someone who maybe thought after a terrible accident they were never going to walk again. And yet through hard work and rehab and grit and dedication and a little luck, they're back walking, running marathons. It's a very similar experience, because these women and men whose lives are here in their throats and totally dependent on a huge machinery of production and orchestra and scenic and costumes and wigs and makeup, this entire community that makes opera, they were denied that opportunity. And, think back to the summer of 2020 and the early fall, certainly before we had a vaccine. Many of these people didn't know if they were ever going to be able to perform.
Yeah.
So consequently, when we're back and doing really big, great opera, it is, in the very best sense of the word, overwhelming for them.
I can imagine the emotions getting back there on that stage. Evans Mirageas, thank you so much for being with us. We are looking forward to another wonderful series and another wonderful summer festival from Cincinnati Opera. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Betsy.